Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne, and today with Dr. Mary Sanders as well. Dr. Mary has over 25 years of experience as a self-employed businesswoman and consultant. She has a doctorate in chiropractic from Logan College of Chiropractic in St. Louis, Missouri. She has a certificate in positive psychology from the Wholebeing Institute in Lennox, Mass., and she has a master's in intuition medicine from the Academy of Intuition Medicine in Sausalito, California. Today, utilizing those combined areas of expertise and the tools of energy medicine, functional blood chemistry analysis, positive psychology, and chiropractic, Dr. Mary supports women who want to transform the way they show up in the world and help them thrive in the areas of health, happiness, and purpose. Hello, Dr. Mary, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Marianne, for having me. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to share with your audience today. And before we get started, I just want to express a tremendous amount of gratitude and appreciation for all that you're doing to support women as they transition through their midlife. So thank you so much, Marianne, for stepping up.
Oh, you just gave me the chills. Thank you for saying that. I really do appreciate that. So what I didn't say in the intro, what I didn't share was that growing up, like many of us, you didn't really know that you wanted to build this unique catalog of experience and credentials that I kind of joked with you about along the way. And they came out of a necessity and sort of a gap in the world that you felt when you were going through some things. So to kind of get us started and share with the audience where you came from to where you are now, could you give some of that history and sort of lay that out for us?
Sure. Thanks for asking, Marianne. I feel compelled just based upon the way that you asked the question that I have to go way, way, way back. And that is, I was born hearing impaired. And I was blessed with another gift, and that being my hand. And the ability, because I couldn't hear the environment, I learned to intuitively read the environment at a very, very, very young age. So take that nugget of information and then fast forward to where I was in undergraduate school, where I was studying chemistry and zoology. So at the time, I thought that I wanted to be a physical therapist, and I knew that the field at that time was very competitive and heavily saturated with a lot of men within the profession. So, and it was very academically driven. I was a good student, but I wasn't an A++ 4.0 student that would guarantee me a slot within the very small group of people that were selected for the physical therapy department. Consequently, and I knew that I was perhaps more of a people person driven type personality. So I naturally gravitated towards chiropractic. And I graduated just a few days before my 25th birthday. And I immediately went into practice as a solo practitioner in Colorado Springs. And so that's when the School of Hard Knocks really started. I made every mistake and I had a few successes along the way. But what I learned was as I was treating patients and holding space for healing within my office, I knew that there was a large energetic component to what it is and how people responded in my environment. It wasn't until about, let's say, 16, 17 years after I started my practice, I went through a huge burnout to where I literally had a hard time managing my day in and day out activities. And at that time, I was not only the main practitioner within the flagship office, I also had a second office and I was consulting other chiropractors throughout the United States. So I burnt myself way, way too thin. I had this idea as to what success was, and I strived and overstrived with an element of perfectionism to become somebody that I thought I was intended to be. Well, it didn't pan out the way that I wanted. It created a huge crash and burn. And to the point when my husband said, "Hey, listen, this isn't going the way that we had planned. If we don't make some changes, some dramatic changes, we were fearful that our relationship was not going to transition through the various different phases. We were just concerned as to the integrity of my health." And he looked at me and he said, what if you let it all go? And I said, no way. This is my baby. I have spent way too many years investing my time and energy into this practice. But as the universe has a beautiful way and a mysterious way of working out, we then did sell the practices and left everything behind. And we moved to Vietnam. And it was in Vietnam that I went through a huge identity crisis. So I left Vietnam and I went down to Bali and I got my yoga teacher's training certification. And then I got really heavily into meditation. And I was like, wow, something really magical is happening here. I really don't know what is happening, but meditation, there's something to it. And it is with that experience that it led me to understand and want to dive deeper into positive psychology, to where I could get into the neuroscience behind and the physical benefits behind meditation. So then I had a good understanding as to how the physical body worked. Now I have an understanding how the psychological brain works. And now a couple years transition, and I'm beginning to wonder what's happening outside the physical body, what's happening within the energetic realm. And that's what led me to study in Sausalito, California at the Academy of Intuition Medicine. So that's when I got my master's degree. And that's when my whole life kind of transitioned into treating people, into holding space for people in a very integrative approach. And I share all of this with you, Marianne, because the flow behind it was so organic. I could not have planned this any better. Even in the epitome of my rigidity, there's no way I could have created this. So life cycles had to happen. I had to go through burnout. We had to move internationally. We had to go through, different life experiences in order to end up where I am today. So, and a roundabout, probably a little bit longer of an explanation than what you had intended for. That's how I ended up where I am today.
I love that. And people will now know why I'm fascinated by you and wanted to talk more with you. You said so many things that I want to circle back on that I didn't even plan to ask you about. But first, I want to acknowledge that you had this picture, this image of what success looked like. And I feel like so many women get caught up in that, including myself. And you said you sort of circled around that with this sense of perfectionism. Like I was just like, me, that's me, right? All the same things. I went through those same things. And we hear from so many women that have these external pictures that we can talk about this a little bit further along, but they're embedded in us from such an early age. And it's so hard to get away from them. But I feel like when you do, it just brings you to this whole different playing field, this whole different life that you didn't even know was there. So I had to say that, even though I didn't plan to say that. But then I want to circle back around and just elaborate a little. So when you and I talked, I jokingly made fun of the fact that you sort of embraced the woo-woo side of things, and you didn't get mad at me. I will say that for the audience. And what I loved is that it was the science and the spiritual coming together. And I wanted to learn more about that because I don't think there's a lot of awareness out there. I think when we hear about these multiple modalities and we start hearing about the spiritual stuff, some people get immediately sort of turned off, or it's just a little bit too conceptual, I guess. And I feel like you had a really great way of kind of breaking that down in consumable pieces and marrying it with the science. And I guess I'm sort of answering my own question, but I was going to ask you, when you say you take an integrative approach to helping people find well-being, helping them find their happy state, that's what we're talking about, right? Marrying those things together.
Absolutely. And Marianne, I just want to touch upon something that you alluded to. And energy medicine is, I know without a doubt that it is my life's purpose. However, my mission is to bridge the gap of traditional science with some of the new science that has yet to be proven. They are working on being able to prove the subtle energetic system. It just hasn't reached traditional science yet. So I'm just an average lady in her mid 50s who happens to have a science background and has now walked to the other side. So consequently, I believe that all of us have the capacity to really embrace our intuition and be able to receive information above and beyond the traditional five senses. We may not be able to scientifically explain it, but it works. And I think I jokingly said to you, Marianne, when we were talking last week, I don't know how my computer works, but I use it every day. And quite honestly, I don't know how my car works, and I drive it every day. So I'm okay not knowing some of the hard science behind the energetic fields and the energy systems that occur within the body. Look at Oriental medicine, traditional Chinese medicine. They're using meridian systems. We can't dissect them, but we know that they exist, and these traditions have been around for years. For years. And energy medicine is very similar in that. So, for example, if you have a tonification or an alarm point within traditional Oriental medicine, you can literally, if you go and dissect into the body, you can typically find a bundle of nerves within that area. The same is true for energy medicine. When we look at the chakra system, at least the 7 main lower chakra systems, that they correspond directly to a plexus or a highway of nerves. And those highway of nerves connect with an endocrine gland. And an endocrine gland is essentially a gland within our body that regulates hormones. So then we get the information coming in from the energy field into the body, into the nerve system, affecting the endocrine system. And then it has to travel up through the central nervous system, or what we would call the vertical power current, and gets transmitted or integrated within the brain. So there's a lot of science behind the woo-woo-ness. And, you just get to be in a place of acceptance in order to be able to comprehend and to wrap your head around and to utilize some of these modalities. So I really, really appreciate, I'm smiling for those of you that can't see me on the camera right now, because there is an element of levity and humor that I bring to this situation, but I also feel with 100% conviction that it is physiologically and scientifically based.
So we're going to come back to the chakras in a minute, because that was one of my questions. But I love your example. We didn't talk about this before, but you brought up the ancient Chinese medicine and really alluded to acupuncture, I think. And I can tell you that as someone who suffers from some sciatica on occasion, and I've had bouts where there has been nothing physical therapy. Nothing will work. And somebody at one point several years ago said, try acupuncture. And I was resistant. And I was like, I don't know. That's not for real, right? I'm just being honest here, you guys. So luckily there's somebody local in town that does it who's phenomenal, and he's got a bit of a sense of humor. So I went in, of course, being me, and was like, all right, I know you're not going to fix me, but I'm going to give it a shot because nothing else worked. This woo-woo stuff, this pie in the sky stuff, this magic, this isn't going to work. Well, I'm here to tell you that after a few visits, what nobody else could solve, this guy's like a god in my mind. He can, anytime I have these problems, I can walk in there and he's going to fix me. We still joke that it's like some magic trick, because he legitimately can just figure out where my pain is coming from, the exact spot, and poke a couple needles in there and boom, it's gone. So not to derail too much, but it's kind of the same way, because to your point, I don't know how it works. It is a little kind of woo-woo, but it works. It works. It's real. And so it's the same thing, I think. But back to the chakra systems, because before we talked, I was honest with you that I didn't know very much about it. I had just started hearing about it as I'm talking to a lot of coaches and people out there. And you shared a real brief rundown with me, but I think many of my listeners will be in the same boat. Could you give us like a high level rundown? And I know this could be a whole episode, so I know you won't be able to go deep, but just kind of touch on what those components are so that people can just know, at least if they hear about it, they'll know what we're talking about.
Absolutely, be my pleasure. And again, this is a very brief and condensed version. So there's so much more that I'd be happy to share at another time. But I made reference to the 7 main chakra systems that are found within the physical body. And the first chakra system is located right at the lowest part of the abdomen. So it connects in just above the pubic symphysis, and it has a front and a back component. And the energy center itself is associated and affiliated with the adrenal system. So because it is the lowest chakra and most intimately connected to the earth, it is the slowest of all the frequencies within the chakra system. Many times it revolves around themes such as identity, purpose, knowing how to show up for your family and what your role is within the community. And you will also find financial issues show up within this energy center. And just above it, just below the belly button, is the second chakra. And the endocrine gland associated with this chakra are the ovaries or the testes, the reproductive organisms. And this area is what controls a lot of your deepest desires and is connected into your creativity. So that's the second chakra. The third chakra, which is also known as the solar plexus, is just below the rib cage above the belly button. And many times this is connected to the pancreas as far as the endocrine system. And many times it's affiliated with autonomy, with control, and with power. So I know that many women do have like a response center within their solar plexus or within their second chakra, meaning that you get a gut feeling when something is not right, or you get sick to your stomach when there is stress and tension within your life. So that's your body's way of telling you that the energy systems are misaligned, and to trust that intuition that you're receiving. The fourth chakra, which is located just in the center of the chest, is related and intimately connected to the thymus. That's the endocrine system. And the fourth chakra is all about compassion. Not only compassion for others, but compassion for yourself. And again, I'm going to speak to women specifically, and that many times it's easier to be compassionate for those that are outside of us, opposed to turning that mirror and reflecting them back inward. So that's a really important energy center for many different reasons that I won't get into today, but the heart center is huge. It's also a transitional area. So the lower 3 chakras that I just talked about relate so intimately to the physical body. And many say that the heart chakra is kind of a transitional space where it can then transcend more into the spiritual realms. And I'll share that with when you transcend into the space of the 5th, which is located in the throat. It is intimately connected into the thyroid, and it is all about authentic expression, being able to express your deepest desires, to find that inner voice. The 6th chakra is known as the third eye, and its center is essentially located within the forehead and is intimately connected into the pineal gland. So it is about seeing the truth in what you witness, and also you could say seeing the unknown as far as clairvoyance. So that happens within the space of the 6th chakra. And then on top of the head, going up vertically, is the 7th chakra. And that is what really intimately connects us into the spiritual realm, the connection of what is omnipresent, that exists around us at all times, that universal knowledge. And we can call it a higher source, regardless of what your religious faith is. It is something that is above and beyond that you attain to have access to or to connect to. And that is connected, that energy center is connected into the pituitary gland. And the pituitary is the mother of all endocrine systems. So it regulates the entire system. So in a nutshell, that's the 7 lower chakras.
That was a great overview. I am fascinated. I definitely want to learn more. I hope my listeners are as well. It really is some fascinating work that I just haven't dug into. So I'm excited about learning more about it. So thank you for sharing that overview. A follow-up question I have on them, and you'll have to tell me if you can even answer it briefly or it's too long, but I've heard the term chakras getting blocked.
Mm-hmm.
So people doing work with people to unblock, and I'm not sure I'm using the right phrase, but I think unblock the chakra. So I guess my question is, how do they get blocked? And then what is the work to unblock them? Is that valid?
Yeah, no, that's a very legitimate question. So a chakra is not a stagnant energy system. You talked about earlier how, as women, we accumulate belief systems or learned pattern as a direct response of our environment. The same is true energetically. We can be in environments that compromise those individual chakras. So, for example, okay, take the 3rd chakra, which represents control, autonomy. Okay. And let's say that you have a female who may, quote unquote, have a blocked or a deficient 3rd chakra, which is the solar plexus. She may have been raised in an environment in which she had excessively controlling parents. And so she fought to have an individual identity outside of her parents, and that was a struggle for her. That can show up as a blocked chakra, or a deficient or a compromised chakra.
That's super interesting. And how do people identify where they're blocked or where they have these deficits? They work with someone like you, obviously, but I mean, is there any sign that the average Joe would just pick up on?
Well, I think when you have repetitive themes in your life, I think that that's a ding, 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 something's happening within an energy center. So, and those themes, we all have them, myself included. Nobody, I think, is immune to having limiting belief systems or responses within relationships or dynamics that they just can't break. So I think that those are kind of the red flags for people to trigger them to say that something is not right.
And then the work to, once you've identified it, which is often the hardest thing, the work to help unblock or to remove that deficit? What does that look like?
So there are many different ways that you can treat a compromised chakra system. Yes, energy medicine is very effective. Getting down to the core root is the first thing. But there are, and again, Marianne, without at the risk of sounding so woo-woo out there, but there are various different tones that resonate with chakras. So that sound therapy. There are individual crystals that might be able to be supportive of the individual energy center. Acupuncture can definitely help release energy centers. Then you can do affirmation. There's a visualization. There's so many different ways that you can help open. And I haven't even touched upon yoga. The asana practice of yoga is very effective in opening up the energy centers within the physical body to release it as you flow through your yoga practice. So I think I may have just provided you like half a dozen different ways that you can approach it, but it's no one recipe is going to be a quick fix for all people. But because that is a common question, and I just want to put it out there, I do have a free guide that I have put together specifically on how to boost your energy centers. And it's super easy to acquire. If you want to go to my website, you can download it, or on any of the social media channels, all you need to do is type in the word energy, ENERGY, and I will make sure that you get this complimentary guide to boosting your energy centers. And in that free guide, I do talk about what does it look like when it's open? What does it look like when it's closed? What kind of life experiences might you have had? And then I give different tips on how to open up at least 3 or 4 for each of the chakras.
I love that. I'm going to go get that. But you also just connected a dot for me because there's a lot of these sound baths coming up. You've heard, obviously, she's shaking her head, you guys. So like everywhere, like I've seen advertisements for them at a lot of places. I know the place that I get massages at, they have a studio where they do sound baths. And I really didn't know what it was. So you just sort of connected that dot for me. It's really, I didn't know that was what it was focused at. It's supposed to be helping with those make your energy flow better in that vein, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that sounds like what it's supposed to do. So that's fantastic. Thanks for that. So I'm going to switch gears a tiny bit. And I just want to show people the vast modalities you cross over and ask you a different question in that you do these functional blood chemistry tests, and that's part of your practice. And I think something that you use as one of the tools when you're working with people. So I'm interested, again, that's to me the exact extreme, the opposite way. So I think it's interesting to kind of take us there. But I would like to understand a little more about what makes that different than a typical blood test you get at any old doctor. What are they testing for? What do you find from that? What do you do with that? What's that look like?
Okay. So have you, and this is for the listeners, the question I'll just put out there, and maybe for you, Marianne, have you ever gone to the doctor and you intuitively know that something is not right with your body, and then they do a CBC, they do a UA, and they call you back a week later and they say, great news, Marianne, everything comes back normal.
100%. Yeah.
And then you're left with, well, why do I feel so crappy? Why don't I feel very good?
Yeah.
A functional blood chemistry opens up the parameters and it allows for a more integrative interpretation. So within a traditional CBC, the AMA, the American Medical Association, will give a guideline based upon the average of a high blood test on one person versus a low average on another person. That's an average. It doesn't take into consideration that for you, Marianne, you may fall in a normal circumstance outside that average. And that being putting you on the border for a counteractive component where you're deficient in another area. So it opens up the parameters for you to take an integrative and a holistic viewpoint as to what's happening functionally within a person's blood chemistry. So then you can look at vitamins, you can look at minerals, you can look at everything that's perhaps not included in a traditional complete blood count, a CBC.
And how does somebody get one of them if they want that done? Is that something you can ask your doctor?
Yeah.
You're wanting to answer that.
No, you can. But my experience has been, and it takes a really strong personal advocate to go in and say, look, I'm an educated consumer, Mr. Dr. So-and-so, I would like to have these blood tests ran. And many times perhaps they may be met with resistance. There are labs. I work with one of them where it is a patient-directed lab. So that means that you as a consumer can go in and say, I want X, Y, Z. And then you can go in and you can use your medical savings account or health savings account and go in and pay for that. And it's not necessarily something that It may not be covered through your primary medical insurance, but it is something that you can request as a consumer.
Okay, that's a good answer. And I assume there's places all across the country that people can do that, yeah?
Yeah, LabCorp Quest, just to name a couple off the top of my head.
Okay.
I use LabCorp because they work with a third-party functional assessment called Avexia. So that's who I typically use.
Excellent information. All right, I'm going to switch gears again. I'm taking you all over the place.
That's fine.
One of the things we've talked about on this podcast many times and within our Facebook group is setting intentions and how intentions sort of help you frame up where you want to go and kind of put it out into the universe. I think you believe in that as well. So can you elaborate on any work you do around that space with your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. Before I go into the energetic work that I do and supporting people in their intentions, I want to talk about a little bit of the science behind intentions. And this comes from the field of positive psychology. And the first thing they state is that you need to be really super clear about your intentions, so that there's really no area for, I'm going to say gray area, but that's the first recommendation that leads into the second, which I think is really dynamic. And that is, how does your intention fit into your overall wellness, or how does it support you and your overall happiness? So they're asking you to align your intentions with your overall well-being. And the third component that positive psychology points out, and I think that this is absolutely brilliant that they're bringing this to mainstream, they say, look, if you can visualize this, okay, your brain doesn't know if it's real or not. If you can visualize this and really put yourself in that environment and really get that kinesthetic physical awareness, your body will physically produce the feel-good hormones within your body as a direct result of visualizing what your intention is. So those three things are shown within science, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah, me too.
Brilliant. So one of the things, and we may have talked about this, Marianne, on the first Monday of every month, I have what is called an intention room. And it's a free event, and I invite women to join me for a 30-minute Zoom call. And the women come in and everybody's silent, and they put in 2 words into the chat that they would like to intend. It's just for them, just for them. And then what happens is, as I guide people through the cleansing and the charging of the energy centers, we go through the 7 main lower chakras that we were talking about, and then we transcend into the 8th chakra, which is above the head, that connects us into that universal consciousness, that divine love, supreme being frequency, where they then plant the seed for their intention. And they align the energy, the intention, the thought. And then what happens is that we come back down through the body, into the body, so that we can align our actions to manifest on a physical realm. Super powerful. So that's one of my favorite things to do. So it's always, I think I do this, every month so that I can receive the benefits as well.
Yeah, I'm super interested. You'll see me show up one of those days, and I'm glad you put it out there because I hope that some others take advantage of that free offer to see what that's like and experience it and see if they want to do more work in that space.
Please do. Please do. It will always be my honor.
It sounds phenomenal. So I'm curious about any transitions you've seen from people that kind of walk in the door, whether that's real or virtual, but come in to work with you and sort of have these mixed feelings about all of it. Like, is it going to really work? I'm going to give it a shot, but they're not really sure. Or they start with you down more of the science-based stuff, but you take them on the journey to what I'm calling the other side, right? And what have you seen? What does that look like? Do you have any really cool stories of people that have really kind of crossed over in their belief system around what it does for them?
I do. But Marianne, I'm going to share with you that your story about going to the acupuncturist, that is textbook for me. Textbook. And it is someone like you that goes through I could educate you until I'm blue in the face, right? And you're still not going to believe me until you have that personal firsthand experience. Once somebody goes through and shifts to the other side, they're never coming back because they've had that experience of saying, this stuff is real and it works.
Yeah.
So just last week, I had a gentleman who I was working on, and we were doing some restructuring around his third chakra and around the theme of control. And so I worked on him 1 week, came back the next week, and he says, Mary, I need to let you know, not sure if it's related, not sure if it's coincidental, but after we had the treatment, I had a lot of pain for 1 day. For 1 day, I had this pain in that space that you were working on. Do you think that's related? And I said, well, what do you think? Doesn't matter what I think. What do you think? And he sat with it a little bit, and I could see that he was kind of pondering the question. And he's like, well, I have been less reactive. I have been able to tolerate work a little bit better. I have been able to do, and he just kind of went through a couple of different issues that he's been looking to overcome. So in a roundabout way, he answered his own question.
I love that. And when you said you were working in that area, you mean physically with your hands, you were adjusting him, or you were doing some one-on-one coaching work around that?
We were doing energy medicine specifically on that area.
Okay. Wow. So he's going over to the other side if he's not there yet.
He is. He's in the process. He doesn't know it quite yet, but he's reaching there.
So interesting though. How did he get there? Like, is he just somebody, put him onto you and he said, I'll give it a try kind of thing? Because it sounds like he's me walking into that doctor's office, not really believing, but hey, we're going to give it a try. Is that who he was?
Yeah, and I think that he's old enough he's middle-aged, and to make a long story short, he doesn't want to carry the anger and the resentment. He doesn't want to hold that for another 40 or 50 years. So it's like he's at that threshold, that breaking point where somebody says, enough is enough. I have to make some changes. That's where he is.
Yeah. And
then he also has a small person that he's raising. And so he doesn't want to transfer any of that onto the small person, which, that's a big motivator.
I love that.
So yeah, that's how he ended up there.
Don't you think it's neat that people, I keep asking this question like there's a real answer out there, but it's rhetorical. I think it's neat that actually, it's not neat. It's unfortunate that for many of us, it takes some big event, something like you said, the breaking point is what made me think of it. And we talked about that earlier too. I really just wish we could all just wake up without, or not ever have forgotten who we wanted to be and all this stuff. But I guess it's not real life. So I guess the more messaging we can get out there and people can realize it sooner, the better. But it's fascinating to me that the things that cause it, it's vast, but it seems to always be some straw that breaks the camel's back. There's something.
Marianne, I do want to just add to that comment because it's a beautiful observation. And that is my wish for society as a whole, but most specifically for the audience that's listening today, that I believe that if we listened to our bodies in a more intimate way, and that we created the space to really hear and to dialogue with our body, I don't think that we would have to get to that breaking in that threshold point. Now, and that's coming from somebody who I ignored every single signal that was delivered to me via my body when I was transitioning through burnout. I was so stubborn, and I knew what to look for, and I ignored it. So I think that's being part of human.
Yeah.
And I think that, I don't get to look at that with judgment. I get to look at it from a place of compassion. So my wish for the women listening to your podcast to create the space, a compassionate space to listen to the physical body.
I love that idea. I guess my only thought is there has to be more Dr. Marys out there. We have to do more teaching earlier on because I don't think we all natively know how to listen to our body, or we forget, right? I guess we're not taught it.
We're not. Our society does not support it, and we're not neurologically wired to behave that way.
Isn't that interesting?
It's sad, but true.
Fascinating. So this has been, you guys, we talked about how long we had before we hit record, and I could go on for a couple of days. So don't be surprised if I knock on your door again. But before we wrap, I just want to give you the opportunity. Is there anything else that we didn't hit on? I know a lot of these were just very high level, just to kind of give people some exposure. You threw out some great resources, and I know you have a lot more on your website and whatnot that people can get engaged with. But is there anything else we didn't touch on that you want to touch on, or any parting advice you want to give?
I do want to extend an invitation to the listeners. I have a boot camp coming up in July on the 18th. The title of the boot camp is From Burnout to Balance. And in those 5 days of the boot camp, I have designed a program to take an integrative approach. And again, there's only so much you can do in 5 days, but it is about how to take an integrative approach to burnout. So again, I talked about some of the components today, but we'll be diving a little bit into the overview of studying where a person is within the spectrum of burnout. And then we'll dive into the spiritual component, the mental component, and also the physical component of burnout. So if this is a topic of interest to your audience, then it's an absolute free of charge 5-day boot camp. And if you missed this one, my guess is come the new year, January of 2023, it'll be offered again. So just keep your eyes and ears open on the website as it'll be announced.
That would be great. So the listeners can take advantage of that. That's a great opportunity. So let me thank you again. This has been so fantastic, and I feel confident we're going to work again in the future. But really, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Marianne. And again, my heart goes out to you and to your listeners and supporting you in all the transitions that we face. May we collectively support one another.
Yeah, for sure. It takes a village. Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review, as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.